My name is Caleb Davies, and for the better part of 15 years, I've been a search and rescue officer, operating primarily in the sprawling, ancient heart of the Appalachian Mountains. It's a job that sounds straightforward on paper. People get lost. People get hurt. We go find them. We bring them back. Sometimes it's a hiker who misjudged the trail or the weather. Sometimes it's an elderly person with dementia who wandered off from a rural home. Sometimes it's kids daring each other to venture deeper into the woods than they should have. We train rigorously navigation, wilderness first aid, rope rescue techniques, tracking, survival skills. We carry heavy packs loaded with gear designed to keep both us and the lost alive in unforgiving terrain. We work with dogs, helicopters, when the weather allows, and dedicated volunteers who know these mountains like the back of their hand. Most of the time, it's grueling, exhausting work, rewarded by the profound relief on someone's face when they see us cresting a ridge, or the choked gratitude in a family member's voice over the radio when we call in a successful find. It's a good job, a necessary job. I believe in it. But there's another side to it. The side we don't talk about, much outside our own tightly knit community. The side that doesn't make it into the official reports or the local news segments, praising our efforts. The Appalachians, they're old. Older than memory, perhaps. These mountains have seen civilizations rise and fall, peoples come and go, and they hold on to secrets like water cupped in ancient stone. They're vast, tangled, and in places, still profoundly wild and untouched. You can walk for days out here and see no sign of another human soul, only the endless trees, the rising and falling ridges, the deep, shadowed hollows where sunlight barely penetrates even at midday. The silence can be immense, broken only by the wind sighing through the pines or the sudden cry of a hawk overhead. It's beautiful, breathtakingly so, but it's also watchful. Sometimes, deep in the backcountry, miles from the nearest road or trail, you get the distinct feeling that you're not just in the wilderness, you're being observed by it. Most SR veterans I know carry unspoken rules, things learned not in training manuals but through hard, often unsettling experience. Call them superstitions. Call them coping mechanisms. Call them whatever you want, but we adhere to them. For instance, if you find a staircase in the middle of the woods, perfectly constructed, leading absolutely nowhere, you turn around. Don't approach it. Don't climb it. Don't even linger near it. Mark its location on your map if you must. Maybe take a picture for the unofficial. Weird shit we found. File back at the station. But then you give it a wide berth and get back to your search grid. We've all seen them, or know someone who has. Immaculate wooden steps, sometimes concrete, occasionally even wrought iron, just standing there. No sign of a former structure. No logical reason for their existence miles from any logging road or homestead ruin. They just are. And every instinct screams that they're wrong. However, we soon discovered why, that they're an intrusion, something that doesn't belong in the natural order of the forest. The few rookies who ignored the advice, who maybe climbed a few steps out of curiosity, they tend not to stay rookies for long. They either quit, citing vague feelings of unease or recurring nightmares, or worse, they become the subject of a search themselves, usually ending unsuccessfully. Then there are the sounds. Everyone knows the woods have their own symphony: bird song, rustling leaves, creaking branches, animal calls. But sometimes, you hear things that don't fit. Voices whispering your name when you know you're alone. Laughter, like children playing, echoing from a ravine where no child could possibly be. Music, faint and melodic, seeming to come from underground. Most unnerving, perhaps, is the absence of sound. Total, complete silence. Not just quiet, but a heavy, pressing void where even the wind holds its breath, the insects cease their chirping, and the birds fall silent. It's usually brief, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, but it feels like an eternity. The air grows thick, heavy, and the hair on your arms stands on end. It feels like the woods are holding their breath, waiting for something. When the normal sounds resume, it's almost jarring, and the relief is quickly followed by a deep, seated anxiety. What caused that silence? What was listening? We also deal with people, or things that look like people. I'm not talking about the usual folks we find. I mean the encounters, rare but memorable, with individuals deep in the wilderness who seem feral. Not just homeless or living off grid, but something fundamentally different. They move with an unnatural speed and silence through dense undergrowth. Their eyes sometimes seem too large or reflect light strangely. They rarely speak, and if they do, it's often in guttural clicks or whispers that don't form recognizable words. Sometimes they just watch you from a distance, motionless among the trees, blending in so well you almost miss them. Other times, they vanish the moment you try to approach or call out. Official reports usually classify these as with hermits or mentally disturbed individuals. And maybe that's all they are. But when you've seen one up close, seen the way they move, the disturbing lack of humanity in their gaze, you start to wonder. And the disappearances themselves, most are explainable, tragic accidents or disorientation. But some defy logic. Experienced hunters vanish, vanishing from familiar territory without a trace. People found deceased in locations that make no sense, miles from where they were last seen, sometimes with no apparent cause of death, just stopped. Clothing found neatly folded by a riverbank, with the owner nowhere to be found. Tracks that suddenly end in the middle of soft ground or snow, as if the person was simply plucked off the earth. We do our best. We follow procedures. We exhaust every possibility. But sometimes there are no answers. The mountains just swallow people. I remember one case early in my career. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, wandered away from a family picnic near a popular overlook. Huge search effort launched immediately. Volunteers, dogs, choppers. Grid searches covering miles of surrounding terrain. We found her favorite doll near the edge of a steep drop-off. But no sign of the girl herself. No tracks leading away. No broken branches, nothing. The dogs lost her scent right there. It was like she evaporated. Days turned into weeks. The search was eventually scaled back, then officially called off. The family was devastated, naturally. The official conclusion was likely a tragic fall, her body perhaps caught in dense undergrowth, or washed away by a stream further down, never recovered. But I was on the ground team that scarred that area inch by inch. There was nowhere she could have fallen without leaving some sign. And the doll, it was placed carefully, sitting upright, facing the overlook, almost like a marker. It felt deliberate. Wrong. Another time, we were looking for a college student who'd gone hiking alone on a well-marked trail system. His car was found at the trailhead, gear seemingly intact. We searched for 5 days. On the 5th day, deep off trail in a section we'd already covered twice, one of the dog handlers found him. He was sitting against a massive oak tree, eyes wide open, staring straight ahead. No visible injuries, no signs of struggle. His water bottle was half full, snacks untouched in his pack. The coroner later listed the cause of death as exposure and dehydration, but it didn't sit right. He was found less than 2 miles from his car, in an area he should have been able to navigate easily, even if slightly lost. And his expression, it wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was astonishment. Profound utter shock frozen on his face, like he'd seen something impossible just before he died. What could possibly cause that reaction out here? These incidents pile up over the years. Little anomalies, strange findings, cases that leave you with more questions than answers. You learn to compartmentalize. You focus on the next call, the next grid search, the procedures, the teamwork. You tell yourself it's the stress, the fatigue, the mind playing tricks in the deep woods. You rationalize the strange lights, seen darting between the trees at night as meteors or aircraft. You dismiss the feeling of being watched as paranoia born from isolation. You have to, otherwise you couldn't do the job. But lately it feels different. The weirdness feels less like background noise and more like something encroaching. The silences seem longer, deeper. The shadows seem darker, more active at the periphery of your vision. We've had a string of disappearances in the northern sector, near Black Ridge, that feel particularly off. Not just hikers, but locals too. People who know these woods. 3 in the last 2 months. Minimal clues, searches turning up nothing concrete. Just gone. And the things we have found. Strange symbols carved into trees, unlike any trail marker or logging notation I've ever seen. Odd arrangements of stones. And whispers among the team, things people are hesitant to say out loud. Talk of strange figures seen near the search areas, fleeting glimpses of something tall and impossibly thin moving through the trees at dusk. Talk of disorientation, compasses spinning wildly, GPS units failing in specific zones. My partner, Dave, a solid guy, 20 years on the job, doesn't spook easily, even he's been quiet, thoughtful. Last week, during the search for the missing fisherman, he pulled me aside. His face was pale, drawn. He told me that while searching a dense thicket near the river, he heard something. Not an animal, not the wind. It sounded like someone mimicking his radio chatter. perfectly replicating the dispatcher's voice, but saying things that made no sense, nonsensical coordinates, mixed with what sounded like his wife's name. He said it came from all around him, like the trees themselves were speaking. He booked it out of there, didn't even call it in, until he was back on the main path. Dave isn't prone to exaggeration. For him to be visibly shaken like that, it makes something. It makes you wonder what else is out here, hidden beneath the canopy, dwelling in the deep hollows and shadowed peaks. What watches from the darkness beyond the beam of your headlamp? What waits just off the trail, silent and patient? We go in looking for the lost, armed with maps and radios and first aid kits. But sometimes, I get the chilling feeling that we're just walking into something else's territory. And maybe, just maybe, the ones who disappear aren't really lost. Maybe they're found. This job forces you to confront the edges of human endurance, the limits of survival, the raw power of nature. But it also forces you, if you stay long enough, to confront the edges of the known, the possibilities that lie just beyond rational explanation. And that edge seems to be getting closer. The call that came in this morning, the one that has us gearing up right now, as dusk begins to settle over the mountains, it feels heavier than usual. A family camping trip gone wrong. Parents frantic. Their 10-year-old son vanished from the tent during the night. No sign of forced entry. No tracks leading away that they could find. Just gone. Near Black Ridge. Again? The dispatcher sounded strained, the details sparse but chilling. As I check my gear one last time, the familiar weight of the pack feels different tonight. Colder. Heavier. The wind whistling around the station sounds less like wind and more like a warning. We're heading back out there, into the darkening woods. And I can't shake the feeling that this time, we might find more than we bargained for. Or perhaps, something might find us. The drive up the rutted Forest Service road toward the designated campsite felt longer than usual. Each mile deeper into the woods, tightening, a knot of apprehension in my stomach. Dusk was painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. The kind of beautiful sunset that usually filled me with a sense of peace, but tonight only served to highlight the encroaching darkness. Black Ridge loomed to the north, its silhouette jagged and imposing against the fading light. Even its name felt heavy, older than the settlers who'd mapped it. Likely a translation of some forgotten Native American term hinting at shadows or ill omens. Dave was quiet beside me in the truck, his usual stream of dry humor replaced by a focused intensity. He gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his eyes constantly scanning the dense woods flanking the road. We both knew this area's reputation, the unofficial warnings passed down from senior officers. Avoid solo patrols near Black Ridge after dark. Double check your compass readings frequently. Trust your gut if a place feels wrong. And never, ever follow unexplained sounds, especially voices or music. However, we soon discovered why. We pulled up to the makeshift incident command post, basically just our supervisor's SUV, a couple of sheriff's department vehicles parked near the turn off for the primitive campsite. where the Peterson family had been staying. The air was already cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. Supervisor Miller met us as we got out, his face grim. He was a good man, pragmatic. By the book, but even he looked unnerved. "Caleb, Dave. Thanks for getting here quick," he said, his voice low. "Parents are over there." He gestured towards a small clearing where a man and a woman, Sarah and Tom Peterson, were huddled together, wrapped in emergency blankets, their faces etched with a terror that went beyond simple worry. Sarah was weeping silently, while Tom stared blankly towards the darkening woods, occasionally calling out their son's name, Lamb. His voice cracked with desperation, swallowed instantly by the vastness surrounding us. Miller quickly briefed us. Liam Peterson, 10 years old, put to bed in their tent around 9 p.m. last night. Parents were by the fire, maybe 50 feet away. Say they didn't hear a thing. Tom went to check on him around 10:30 p.m. Tent flap was open, sleeping bag empty. No signs of struggle inside. They searched the immediate area themselves, then called 911 when they couldn't find him. Sheriff's deputies did a perimeter sweep, found nothing obvious. No tracks leading away from the tent they could identify as his. Standard procedure kicked in. We checked our gear: headlamps, radios, GPS units, first aid kits, extra batteries, water, emergency rations. 2 volunteer teams were already gearing up, familiar faces, experienced woodsmen who knew the terrain. Miller assigned us initial search sectors, radiating out from the campsite, focusing on the most likely paths a disoriented child might take, but also pushing into the denser woods, where the parents feared he might have wandered. The plan was to sweep outwards through the night, using thermal imagers where the canopy allowed, and relying on grid patterns and voice calls. Keep your radios open. Standard check-ins every 30 minutes. Miller reminded us, his eyes meeting mine with unspoken weight. And stick together. Dave and I were assigned a sector, heading northwest, directly towards the lower slopes of Black Ridge. As we walked past the Petersons' tent, a small, cheerful blue dome standing starkly against the gloom, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. The open flap fluttered slightly in the breeze, like an empty mouth. Inside, I could see a child's sleeping bag, slightly rumpled, and a stuffed dinosaur lying on its side. Everything looked so terribly normal, yet fundamentally wrong. There should have been tracks. A child wandering out in the night, especially if scared or disoriented, would leave signs: disturbed leaves, broken twigs, footprints in the soft earth near the tent. But the ground, damp from recent rain, showed nothing conclusive. Just the overlapping boot prints of the parents and the initial responders. We switched on our headlamps, the powerful beams cutting sharp cones through the twilight. The woods closed in around us almost immediately. Tall pines and hemlocks towered overhead, their dense canopy already swallowing the last vestiges of daylight. The undergrowth was thick rhododendron tangles, mountain laurel, ferns clinging to moss-covered rocks. Progress was slow, methodical. We moved in parallel, about 20 yards apart, sweeping our lights back and forth, calling Liam's name at regular intervals. "Wham! Can you hear us? We're here to help." Our voices sounded thin, instantly absorbed by the muffling silence of the deep woods. The only response was the rustle of our own movements, the occasional snap of a twig underfoot, and the sigh of the wind high in the branches. It's a familiar routine, this kind of search, but tonight felt different. The air was heavy, expectant. The shadows cast by our headlamps seemed deeper, dancing at the edges of our vision, sometimes coalescing into shapes that looked disturbingly like figures, watching from just beyond the light's reach. I found myself glancing over my shoulder, far more often than usual. Dave, normally unflappable, was audibly muttering curses under his breath as he fought through a particularly dense patch of laurel. "Place feels wrong tonight, Caleb," he said over the radio, his voice tight, like we're walking through cold soup. "Copy that," I replied, trying to keep my own voice steady. "Just keep your eyes peeled. Let's cover this grid section thoroughly." An hour crawled by, then another. The woods grew darker, colder. The sounds shifted. The daytime birds were silent, replaced by the occasional hoot of an owl, the distant yip of a coyote, and other, less identifiable rustles and clicks from the surrounding darkness. We checked in with Miller every 30 minutes. Negative findings from all teams so far. The lack of any sign was deeply unsettling. A lost child usually leaves something. Around midnight, we were working our way up a gentle slope, covered in thick leaf litter. My light swept across the base of a large, gnarled oak and something caught my eye. I stopped, signaling Dave over. There, pressed clearly into a patch of damp earth, partially sheltered by the tree's roots, was a footprint. It was a single print, barefoot. And it was wrong. It was too large for a 10-year-old boy, maybe adult-sized, but the shape was off. The toes seemed too long, the heel oddly narrow. More disturbingly, there were no other prints around it. No trail leading to it or away from it. Just one solitary, strange footprint, pointing deeper into the woods, towards the heart of Black Ridge. "What the hell is that?" Dave whispered, shining his own light on it. "Not Liam's. Too big. Hunter maybe, but barefoot. No other sign." I murmured, kneeling closer. The print was sharp, relatively fresh. No scuffs, no disturbed leaves around it. Like someone just materialized here, took one step, and vanished. I took a photo, logged the coordinates, but a cold dread seeped into me. This wasn't a clue. It felt like a message, or a deliberate misdirection. We continued our search pattern, the discovery of the footprint adding another layer of tension to the already strained atmosphere. Not long after, maybe half a mile further up the slope, Dave called out, "Caleb, check this out." He was pointing his light high up into the branches of a thorny locust tree, easily 20 feet off the ground. Snagged securely on a cluster of sharp thorns was Liam's stuffed dinosaur, the same one I'd seen in the tent. There was absolutely no way the boy could have climbed that high, especially not on that treacherous tree. And how could it have gotten there? Thrown. By whom? And why? It wasn't torn or damaged, just placed. like the doll at the Overlook years ago. Deliberate. Unsettling. We marked the location, radioed it in. Miller sounded disturbed, but instructed us to keep searching the area. As we moved away from the tree, I thought I heard it, a faint sound, almost like humming, or a child softly singing a nursery rhyme. It seemed to come from uphill, deeper into the woods. "Liam," I called out, louder this time. "Is that you?" The humming stopped abruptly. Silence descended, thick and heavy. Not the normal quiet of the woods, but that wrong silence I mentioned before. The air felt like static electricity, pressing in. Even the wind died. Dave and I froze, exchanging uneasy glances in the beams of our headlamps. It lasted, maybe 20 seconds. Then the normal night sounds, the crickets. The rustle of leaves slowly faded back in, seeming unnaturally loud after the void. "You hear that?" Dave asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yeah," I confirmed. The humming, then the silence. "Let's move," he said, his hand hovering near the heavy duty flashlight on his belt that doubled as a decent club. We pushed on, nerves frayed. The terrain grew steeper, rockier. We were definitely on the slopes of Black Ridge now. The trees were older here, larger, their branches interwoven overhead, blocking out the sliver of moon that had risen. It was profoundly dark, our headlamps, the only source of light in an ocean of black. It was maybe 2 a.m. when it happened. We were navigating a narrow game trail along the side of a steep ravine. I was in the lead, picking my way carefully over loose rocks. I paused to check my GPS, momentarily looking down. When I looked up, Dave, who had been right behind me, wasn't there. "Dave," I called out, swinging my light back down the trail. Nothing. Just the empty path and the dark woods. My heart hammered against my ribs. We were supposed to stick together. "Dave, radio check?" I spoke into my mic, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Static crackled back. Then, a voice. It sounded like Dave, but distorted, echoing slightly like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Follow." "Caleb." "Turn back." The transmission cut out, replaced by more static. "Dave, what's your position?" "Repeat." I yelled into the radio. Only silence answered. "Okay. Don't panic." Procedure. He could have slipped, fallen down the ravine. He could have stepped off the trail for a moment. I swept my light down the steep slope into the ravine. Darkness. No sound of movement. I swept it back along the trail, then into the woods beside it. Nothing. It was as if he'd simply vanished in the few seconds I'd looked away. Then I heard it again. A whisper right behind my ear. Clear as day. My own name. "Caleb." I spun around, dropping into a defensive crouch, my heavy flashlight now gripped tightly in my hand. Nothing. Absolutely nothing there. Just the dense, dark trees, the suffocating silence that had fallen again, and the pounding of my own blood in my ears. My breath plumed white in the beam of my headlamp. The air felt impossibly cold. As I slowly straightened up, my light beam swept across the trunk of a massive hemlock just off the trail. And there it was, freshly carved into the bark, glowing faintly white against the dark wood. A symbol. Not letters, not any trail marker I knew. It was complex, spiral-based, with sharp, jagged lines radiating outwards. It looked almost like a stylized eye, or a vortex. It was identical to the symbols rumored to have been found in other parts of Black Ridge recently. Seeing it there, freshly cut, in the spot where Dave had just vanished, the rational part of my brain screamed that this was impossible. But every instinct honed by years in the wilderness was screaming danger. My radio crackled again. This time, it was Dave's voice, clear as day, though sounding breathless. "Caleb, you there? Where the hell did you go?" Relief washed over me, so intense my knees almost buckled. "Dave! I'm here!" "Where are you?" "Right behind you, man," he said, sounding confused. I stopped for a second to tie my boot, looked up, and you were gone around the bend. "I've been calling you." I turned, and there he was, maybe 30 yards back down the trail, looking bewildered. Had I really walked that far ahead without noticing? Had the whisper, the symbol, been imagined? Hallucinations brought on by stress and exhaustion. But the silence had felt real. The chill felt real. And Dave hadn't heard the whisper, hadn't heard my frantic radio calls. Just lost track for a second. I lied, not wanting to sound crazy. Not wanting to voice the fear solidifying in my gut. "Let's stick closer." We regrouped, neither of us mentioning the discrepancy in our experiences. But the easy camaraderie was gone, replaced by a tense, watchful silence. We continued the search pattern, but the energy was different. We were both spooked, jumping at every sound, sweeping our lights constantly into the darkness beyond the trail. As the first hint of gray began to lighten the eastern sky, signaling the approach of dawn, Miller's voice came over the radio, calling all teams back to the command post. The first sweep was over. No sign of Liam Peterson. Just a missing boy, distraught parents, a single strange footprint, a toy in an impossible place, unnerving sounds, disturbing silences, and now, a freshly carved symbol, and a few minutes of terrifyingly unaccounted for time. Trudging back down the slope, exhausted and disheartened, I looked towards the peaks of Black Ridge, now emerging stark and gray in the pre-dawn light. The rational explanations felt thin, stretched taut like old fabric. Something was wrong here, deeply wrong. We hadn't found Liam, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stumbled into something else entirely. Something ancient, patient and watchful. And as we prepared for the long day of searching ahead, pushing deeper into the territory marked by that unsettling symbol, I knew the real challenge wasn't just finding a lost child. It was surviving whatever else waited for us in the shadowed heart of these mountains. Dawn broke over Black Ridge, not with warmth and promise, but with a cold, gray light that seemed to leach the color from the world. We trudged back to the makeshift command post, bones aching, minds numb with exhaustion and the lingering chill of the night's unsettling events. The scene was busier now. More vehicles, fresh faces from state SAR teams, even a couple of National Guard Humvees. The search was escalating significantly. Supervisor Miller was coordinating with grim efficiency, maps spread across the hood of his SUV, barking orders into the radio. Sarah and Tom Peterson were still there, huddled near a sputtering portable heater someone had set up. Their eyes, red, rimmed and haunted, scanned the face of every returning searcher, desperate for news that wasn't coming. Seeing their raw anguish was a familiar, gut-wrenching part of the job, but layered over the sheer weirdness of this particular case, it felt almost unbearable. How could you explain finding a single, bizarre footprint or a toy 20 feet up a tree to parents clinging to rational hope? You couldn't. So, we just offered quiet condolences and got our new assignments. The strategy shifted with daylight and increased manpower. Wider grid patterns, more thorough coverage, pushing deeper into the Black Ridge Wilderness area. Helicopters were grounded due to unpredictable wind currents common around the ridge, a fact that only added to the area's isolating reputation. Dave and I, along with two fresh SAR techs named Riley and Ben, were assigned a sector that included the area where we'd found the footprint and the toy, and extended further up the slope towards the denser, older growth forest near the ridge's spine. Walking back into the woods in daylight felt strangely different. The shadows were less menacing, replaced by dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. Birdsong had returned, a cacophony that should have been reassuring but somehow felt brittle, superficial, as if masking a deeper silence beneath. The feeling of being watched hadn't dissipated with the darkness. If anything, it felt more pervasive now. Less like hiding predators, and more like the ancient awareness of the forest itself, scrutinizing our intrusion. The initial hours of the daytime search were frustratingly mundane, yet threaded with persistent anomalies. We meticulously covered our assigned grid, fighting through the same thick undergrowth, calling Liam's name until our throats were raw. But the woods themselves seemed resistant. GPS units flickered erratically, placing us yards away from where our compasses and terrain association indicated we should be. At one point, we followed a clear game trail that should have looped back towards a stream, according to the map, only to find it petered out abruptly in an impenetrable wall of rhododendrons that hadn't been marked. We had to backtrack nearly half a mile, the unsettling feeling of being subtly manipulated, of the landscape itself shifting around us, growing stronger. Around mid-morning, we entered a small clearing dominated by ancient, moss-draped oaks. As we stepped into the open space, the air temperature plummeted noticeably. Goosebumps prickled my arms despite the exertion of the hike. Ben, the younger of the two techs with us, shivered. "Anyone else feel that?" he asked, his breath misting slightly. We all nodded. It was a localized cold spot, maybe 10 degrees colder than the surrounding woods, with no discernible cause, no draft, no nearby water source, and it was eerily quiet. The ubiquitous bird song and insect hum that the rest of the forest were completely absent within the clearing. It was like stepping into a soundproof room. The dogs with another nearby team, we later, over the radio, had refused point blank to enter this clearing, whining and pulling back against their leads. We didn't linger, the oppressive silence and unnatural cold pushing us back into the normal woods with unspoken urgency. Then there was the smell. Intermittently, carried on the breeze, we'd catch whiffs of something deeply unpleasant. A cloying mix of stagnant water, decay, and something sharp, almost metallic, like ozone. It would appear suddenly, linger for a minute, then vanish as quickly as it came, leaving only the normal scent of pine and damp earth. It was early afternoon when we found the stairs. We were traversing a particularly steep, rocky section, well off any marked trail, following a faint series of broken branches that just might have indicated someone had passed this way. Riley, who was slightly ahead, stopped dead, raising a hand. "Boss, you need to see this." We pushed through a final screen of branches and just stopped staring. There, rising out of the uneven forest floor, was a staircase. Not wood this time, but stone. Gray, weathered granite steps, impeccably crafted, each one perfectly level. Ascending smoothly for perhaps 30 feet, before ending abruptly in mid-air. Nothing above it but empty space in the tree canopy. Nothing below it suggesting a foundation or prior structure. It was just there. Solid, real, and utterly, profoundly wrong. Moss grew thick in the crevices between the stones, suggesting it had been there a long time. Yet it showed no significant signs of collapse or major weathering. It looked like it had been carefully maintained, which was impossible. "Okay," Ben breathed, wide-eyed. That's one of those things, right? The stairs. The hushed rumors had clearly reached even the newer techs. Dave nodded slowly, his face grim. "Looks like it." I radioed Miller, describing our location and discovery as calmly as I could. There was a long pause on the other end. "Stone stairs. Leading nowhere. Confirm your coordinates." "Caleb." I did. Another pause. "All right. Document it. Photograph it. Do not approach it closely or attempt to climb it. Maintain visual and continue, searching the area around its base. Proceed with extreme caution." His voice was tight with protocol, but I could hear the underlying unease. This wasn't in the manual. We fanned out slightly, keeping the impossible staircase in view. The air around it felt heavy, static like before a thunderstorm. The woods seemed even quieter here, the birdsong muted, the wind failing to penetrate the pocket of stillness surrounding the structure. I noticed carvings near the base of the bottom step, almost hidden by moss. I knelt down, carefully brushing some away. Spirals, jagged lines, similar in style to the symbol I'd seen carved on the tree during the night, but smaller, more intricate. As I was examining the carvings, it started. A sound, faint at first, seeming to drift down from above us. A child's voice, sobbing. "Help me, I'm scared." We all froze, head snapping up towards the top of the stone stairs. "Liam," Riley called out, taking an instinctive step forward, before Dave put a hand on his arm, stopping him. The sobbing continued, sounding heartbreakingly real. Then, another voice joined it, this one female, filled with anguish.
"Liam,
"Baby, where are you?"
Mommy's here."
It sounded exactly like Sarah Peterson, but it was wrong. There was a subtle flatness to it, a slight echo, like a recording played in an empty room. It was the mimicry Dave had described hearing over the radio. My blood ran cold. Something was up there or somewhere nearby, using their voices, trying to lure us. Nobody moves. I ordered, my voice low and harsh. That's not them. Standard call, out procedure only. I raised my voice, projecting authority I didn't feel.
Lime Peterson! This is search and rescue!
If you can hear us, call out. The sobbing and the woman's voice stopped instantly. Silence slammed back down, heavier than before. We stood frozen, scanning the empty air above the stairs, the dense trees surrounding us, waiting. Suddenly, a loud clatter from uphill, behind us and to the right. A shower of small rocks and debris tumbled down the slope. Instinctively, we all spun towards the sound, lights flashing that way, even the daylight. It was a natural-seeming distraction, a small rock slide maybe, but the timing was too perfect. And in that instant, as our attention was diverted, I saw it. Just a flicker. At the edge of my vision, higher up the slope beyond the stairs. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, grayish like the tree bark, moving with unnatural fluidity between the ancient trunks before vanishing completely. It was the same thing I'd glimpsed during the night. Ben gasped. Did you see that? Riley nodded, pale-faced. Dave just swore under his breath, his hand tightening on his radio. It wasn't just my exhausted mind playing tricks. It was real. Command, this is SAR Team Alpha. I said into the radio, trying to keep my voice level. Be advised, we are experiencing auditory phenomena, consistent with mimicking voices, possibly belonging to the missing boy and his mother, originating from vicinity of the stone structure. Also had visual confirmation by multiple team members of an unidentified figure, tall, slender, moving rapidly uphill from our position. Request guidance. The radio crackled. Miller's voice was strained. Copy that, Alpha. Maintain position. Do not pursue the figure. Do not approach the structure. Another team is being diverted to your location for backup. Sit tight. Sit tight. Easier said than done when mimicking voices were echoing in the woods, and stick. Figures were darting through the trees. We formed a loose defensive circle, backs towards each other, scanning the silent woods around the impossible staircase. The minutes stretched out, thick with tension. Then Dave, who had binoculars out scanning the top of the stairs, hissed, "Caleb, look." He passed me the binoculars. I raised them, focusing on the top step, the one that ended in nothingness 30 feet above the ground. My breath hitched. Sitting perched right on the edge, weighed down by a small stone, was a child's baseball cap, bright red with a cartoon rocket ship on the front. Liam Peterson's cap, described perfectly by his parents during the initial report. It hadn't been there when we first arrived. We would have seen it. It had been placed there, deliberately, while we were distracted by the voices and the rock slide. Placed on the top step of a staircase leading nowhere, high above the forest floor. How? Why? Was Liam up there? Had he been taken up there? Was the figure we saw responsible? Was it a trap? A marker? A taunt? Questions flooded my mind, none with logical answers. The backup team was still minutes away. Daylight, I realized with a jolt, was already starting to fade. The shadows were lengthening again, creeping back out from under the trees. we were deep in Black Ridge territory, standing before an inexplicable structure linked directly to the missing boy, with evidence of something inhuman actively watching and manipulating us. Protocol dictated we wait for backup, secure the area, maybe pull back as night fell. But Liam's cap was right there. A tangible link, proof that whatever path he'd taken, or been taken on, had led here. Every Sayar instinct screamed to follow the clue, to push forward, to investigate the area above the stairs where the figure had vanished. Protocol warred with the desperate urgency to find the boy before another night descended on these woods. Looking up at that final stone step, at the small red cap that represented a lost child, and then towards the darkening, watching woods uphill, I knew a decision had to be made, and fast. Waiting might be safer. Waiting might also be a death sentence for Liam Peterson. The wrong turning wasn't just a misplaced trail anymore. It felt like a choice, placed squarely before us by whatever ancient, malevolent intelligence resided in Black Ridge. The sight of that small red cap, perched precariously on the edge of nothingness, 30 feet above us, solidified something cold and hard in my gut. Protocol screamed, wait. Every rational SAR procedure dictated securing the area, holding position until backup arrived, avoiding unnecessary risks, especially with nightfall rapidly approaching. But looking at that cap, knowing it was placed there deliberately, knowing a child's life was measured in minutes of daylight, and remembering the fleeting glimpse of that unnaturally tall figure melting into the trees. Uphill, waiting felt like complicity. It felt like surrender. We're going up, I said, my voice low but firm, cutting through the tense silence. Ben stared at me, his face pale. Boss, command said to wait. We don't know what's up there. That thing we saw. We know Liam's cap is up there. I countered, meeting his gaze. And we know something put it there. Likely the same thing that took him. Backup is still 10, maybe 15 minutes out. That's too long. We move cautiously, stay tight, radios open. We follow the figure's path uphill. Dave, his face set in grim lines, simply nodded. He'd seen enough weirdness in his years. Trust instinct over the manual. When things went this far sideways. Riley hesitated for a moment, then gave a reluctant nod. Ben swallowed hard but fell into line. Risking our lives was part of the job description, but this felt different. This felt like knowingly stepping off the map of the rational world. We moved past the base of the stone stairs, giving the structure itself a wide berth. The air grew colder, heavier, the oppressive silence deepening. It felt like crossing an unseen boundary, leaving the merely unsettling woods behind and entering something else. Something watchful and ancient, and fundamentally alien. I kept my headlamp pointed towards the ground, immediately ahead, sweeping occasionally, but my senses were stretched taut, listening for any whisper, any snap of a twig that didn't belong. Uphill from the stairs, the ground rose sharply. The trees here were massive, gnarled behemoths, mostly hemlocks and ancient oaks, draped in shawls of moss and lichen. Finding a trail left by the figure we'd seen was difficult. It hadn't moved like a person or an animal, crashing through brush. The signs were subtle, disturbing. A thick branch, easily 10 feet off the ground, snapped cleanly in two. A patch of deep moss on a boulder, strangely scraped away, as if something impossibly long had brushed against it. There were no footprints, but there was a sense, a faint path of wrongness leading upwards. We found Lamb's other glove, a small blue mitten, snagged on a thorny bush about 50 yards afell from the stairs. Like the cap, it seemed deliberately placed, another breadcrumb on a terrifying trail. As we pushed deeper, the mimicking sound started again, intermittent whispers seeming to come from the trees around us. He's hurt. This way. Daddy, where are you? Lost, so cold. Each time, we paused, called out officially, got no response, and pushed onward. The psychological warfare grating on our already frayed nerves. Dave started muttering prayers under his breath. Ben was visibly shaking but kept moving. Riley scanned the dense canopy above us constantly, his shotgun held at the ready. Though what good it would do against something that moved like smoke was anyone's guess. The faint trail of disturbed nature led us higher, towards a cluster of jagged, black rock outcroppings near the spine of the ridge. The trees thinned slightly here, revealing a small, unnaturally level clearing, almost encircled by these dark stones. The stones themselves were wrong smooth in places, as if weathered by millennia, but sharp and fractured in others, looking almost purposefully carved into menacing shapes. The air in the clearing was deathly still and freezing cold, biting at exposed skin despite the exertion of the climb. And the silence, it was absolute. No wind, no birds, no insects. Just the frantic pounding of our own hearts and the harsh sound of our breathing in the icy air. Etched onto the surface of the largest central rock, and repeated on several others, encircling the clearing, was the symbol. The spiral vortex like eye, larger, and more deeply carved than the ones I'd seen before. It seemed to pulse with a faint darkness, drawing the eye, making my head swim slightly. Check the perimeter, I ordered, my voice hoarse. Stay in visual contact. Dave and Rownley moved carefully around the edge of the clearing, their lights sweeping the base of the rocks and the tree line. Ben stuck close to me, his eyes darting nervously. My gaze was fixed on the central rock formation. There was a dark cleft at its base, almost like a shallow cave entrance, partially obscured by shadows even with our lights hitting it. Caleb. Dave's voice was tight, urgent. He was pointing towards that cleft. I moved closer, my heavy flashlight beam piercing the shadows. And I saw him. Liam Peterson was huddled deep within the shallow overhang, his back pressed against the cold stone. His eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead. But they weren't focused on anything in the clearing. They seemed fixed on some middle distance, some internal landscape of horror. He was shivering violently, dressed only in his thin pajamas, despite the bone-chilling cold. His red baseball cap lay on the ground beside him. He didn't react to our lights, didn't respond when I called his name softly. He just stared, utterly vacant, a profound and terrifying emptiness in his gaze. It reminded me chillingly of the college hiker, we'd found years ago, frozen in astonishment. Relief ward with a new, deeper wave of dread. He was alive. But what had happened to him? What had he seen that could hollow out a 10-year-old boy like that? As I took a step towards him, a low sound emanated from the deeper shadows within the rock cleft behind Liam. A soft, guttural clicking, accompanied by a faint rustling. My blood turned to ice. I raised my light higher, trying to penetrate the darkness. 2 points of pale light reflected back at me, low to the ground, like animal eyes. But then, another pair appeared, slightly higher. And another. And a faint outline began to resolve itself from the gloom, something impossibly tall and thin, folded into the shadows like a praying mantis, made of smoke and bone. Its limbs seemed too long, jointed at unnatural angles. I couldn't make out a face. Only those pale, watching eyes and the vague impression of a long, narrow head. The clicking sound intensified, seeming to vibrate in the rock itself. Grab the boy. Now, I hissed, taking a step back, keeping my light trained on the shifting darkness in the cleft. Dave lunged forward, scooping the unresponsive Liam into his arms. The boy remained limp, eyes wide and staring. As Dave turned to retreat, the clicking sound rose to a high-pitched chittering, and the figure in the shadows seemed to unfold, rising to an impossible height within the low overhang. More pale eyes blinked open in the darkness around it. There wasn't just one. Move. Move. Riley yelled, already backing towards the edge of the clearing. Shotgun raised. We scrambled out of the clearing. Dave carrying Liam, Riley and Ben covering our retreat, me bringing up the rear. Constantly sweeping my light back towards the silent, watching rocks. No figures pursued us out of the clearing, but the feeling of being watched, of malevolent intelligence focused intently on us, was overwhelming. The retreat down the mountain as night fully descended was a panicked, stumbling nightmare. The woods seemed actively hostile now. Paths we'd taken on the way up seemed to have vanished or twisted into dead ends. Thorny branches snagged at our clothes. Unseen roots seemed to trip us. The mimicking whispers returned, louder now, swirling around us, using our own names, trying to separate us in the dark. Lost, leave him, save yourselves. Not safe yet sees you. Liam remained a dead weight in Dave's arms, shivering uncontrollably but otherwise silent, his eyes still fixed on that unseen horror. Every shadow seemed to hold movement. Every gust of wind sounded like whispering pursuit. We bypassed the stone stairs, plunging blindly through the undergrowth to voting near them again. Fear lent us speed, but exhaustion and disorientation were taking their toll. Finally, blessedly, we heard shouts from below. The backup team, their headlamps cutting through the trees, were the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. We practically collapsed into their ranks, gasping for breath, adrenaline fading to leave behind bone, deep exhaustion and terror. Explaining what happened was fragmented, bordering on incoherent. We had the boy, that was the main thing. But the stairs, the symbols, the voices, the figure. We tried, but the words felt inadequate, insane, even as we said them. The backup team exchanged uneasy glances. They hadn't seen or heard anything unusual on their way up to the rendezvous point, though they confirmed our coordinates. For the stairs were accurate, they'd skirted the location cautiously as per Miller's orders. Liam was rushed down the mountain, wrapped in thermal blankets, and taken immediately to the hospital. The official story became one of exposure, disorientation, severe psychological trauma, kidnapping out due to lack of evidence. What could the authorities do, with reports of stone stairs to nowhere and tall, gray figures in the woods? The case remained officially unresolved. Another strange disappearance in the Appalachians, with a marginally better outcome than most. Though better felt like the wrong word. Liam never spoke about what happened in the woods. He remained withdrawn, prone to night terrors. Occasionally found drawing the spiral eye-like symbol on any surface he could find. His parents eventually moved away, seeking specialized help far from Black Ridge. The stone stairs are still out there, of course. Unofficially, the area around Black Ridge is now considered a low-priority search zone. SAR teams avoid it unless absolutely necessary. The veterans know why. We don't talk about it much, but we know. We know the woods are deeper and older than we can comprehend. We know there are things dwelling in the shadows that defy explanation, ancient entities that watch and wait, and sometimes take. I still work search and rescue. It's in my blood. But I carry the memory of that night, of those vacant eyes and clicking sounds in the dark, like a physical weight. I understand the unspoken rules now more than ever. Stick to the trails. Don't follow strange sounds. Avoid places that feel wrong. And if you find a staircase in the middle of the woods, leading nowhere, turn around and walk away. Don't look back, because some things are not lost. They are kept. And the mountains always keep their secrets,